This is OPI SQL Server Part 2, Linked Servers. Please subscribe to this channel and like the videos. Now we're going to set up a working path querying Excel tables via SQL Server by SQL embedded in an Excel data connection. In Excel, we can access SQL Server via data connections or via Power Query. First, we'll explore data connections. In Excel, begin setup of a connection the usual way. Excel ribbon Data, Existing Connections, Browse for more. Excel opens an Explorer pane. Click the New Source button. The Data Connection Wizard pane opens. Select Microsoft SQL Server and click Next. Set up the connection to connect to your SQL Server instance. Type in the server name. It will be the name of the server computer, / and the name of the SQL Server instance. You can see my setup highlighted for syntax. If you're connecting to SQL Server installed on your machine, you can use your computer's name as shown, or you could instead use computer name localhost. Choose Windows Authentication unless IT has given you something else, and click Next. Enter the name of the database you created. The example shows Excel Proto. No need to specify a table to connect to, but it won't hurt if you do. Click Next. Now we'll save the connection created so far as a template that we can clone for later connections. This saves a little time, but you can always just start from the beginning of this sequence to create another new connection. Enter a file name with .odc file type, a description, and a friendly name. I included the name of the server in all three, but later decided it's better to use the project name instead, so I suggest you use project name instead of server name. Click Finish. That creates the connection, but you still have to specify how it's used. Since this is a template connection, we don't want to connect it to anything. And don't add this template to the data model. So choose Only Create Connection, uncheck the data model, and click OK. Now you have a template connection you can clone, or you can just start a new connection and repeat the previous steps if you want some parameter to be different. Back in Excel, to set up a new connection cloned from the master connection, ribbon Data, Existing Connections, select the master template connection. You can tell from the friendly name and the notes shown in the pane. Looks like I named it a little differently here, but anything I named master would have been set up just as we've seen. Then click Open. The Import Data pane opens. This connection that we're building will probably be used by several pivot reports, so we won't tie it to a specific one yet, so choose Only Create Connection. We're going to add SQL to this connection, so click Properties. So here's where we do the real work. On the Usage tab, name the connection, probably project name and some indication of tables to be used by the SQL. My name includes ABDBE, which are initials for the 5 tables used by the SQL I'm going to use in this connection. I suggest turn on Refresh this connection on Refresh All, and turn off all other refresh choices. Refresh All should be on for any query that's going to drive your pivot tables. If this is a connection to pull in the MS Project exported file, remember Path 3? I also suggest you not turn on Refresh All choice. You'll want to refresh that table by a specific action only when you've completed updating the MPP. For right now, the SQL we're going to add is for a data query to drive pivots, so Refresh All is on. On the Definitions tab, don't worry about the connection file name right now. You're going to create it shortly. Notice the command type and command text fields. That's where we're about to put in SQL that will be executed whenever this query is refreshed. Now, about the SQL that we're going to embed in this connection. Here's a query that joins the relevant Excel tables for most PowerOpI solutions. Your table names might be different, and it's possible you would have some more or less tables, so modify the SQL if you need to. My tables are alloc, BOM, dates, builds, and elements, hence the ABDBE in the connection name. The table names are prefixed by TBL in Excel, and their shadow range names that I'll be able to see and use from SQL Server were prefixed by RNG by the VBA linking code. Notice that the joins are from a table in BI underscore linked underscore tables SQL Server. That's the name of the linked server created a few slides ago. For each table you join, you use the name of the linked server connected to the workbook that table lives in. Notice the SQL reference and name for each table as SQL Server pulls it through the linked server. The Excel table is accessed through the linked server using the shadow range name for the Excel table created by the VBA linking code you installed in the Excel workbook. That range is addressed using a four-part name in SQL Server. Sequence for the four-part name is server.database.schema.object. In this case, server is the name of the linked server for the Excel file, which in this example is BI underscore linked underscore table SQL Server. The names of the database and schema are each null. The name of the object specified is the shadow range name created by the VBA linking code in Excel. So the four-part name looks like BI underscore linked underscore table SQL Server dot null dot null dot range alloc. You type nothing to represent the nulls. The four-part reference to that table then is named within the query by the clause as Excel alloc to be used throughout the query. So you need all the dots, and you also need to name each table as it's linked into the query, and then use that name within the query. You'll see each table name is used in the ON clauses used to identify linking fields for joins, and in the SELECT clause where fields are selected from the table to populate the query result. Create your SQL, probably a clone of this with names changed if your Excel table names are different. I suggest try out the SQL in an SSMS query window. Prefix it there by use Excel Proto, Go, or whatever is the name of the database you created. When it works in SSMS, copy it as I've shown on this slide without any use or go, so you have a string on your clipboard. I found that this query is a nice reusable pattern for logistics projects that I've used as examples throughout these videos. So back to the Connection Properties Definition tab, set the command type field to SQL, paste the SQL string created on the previous slide into the command text field on the Connection Properties Definition tab, then click Export Connection File ... to save this connection clone with a new name. From Export Connection File, navigate to your Documents My Data Sources directory. Name the connection file like project name with query abbreviation like my ABDBE. Use file type .odc and click Save. Back in Connection Properties, click OK when the export completes. Now you're back to the Import Data pane. It's still most flexible to only create connection now. You can connect a pivot table to this connection when you create the pivot. If you're going to add this connection to the data model, check that box. A couple of notes on this. You don't want to have a bunch of unused connections lying around, especially for the data model. Whether they're used or not, they're going to respond to a refresh all from Excel and may take a long time. It may not work after tables are changed and no longer work with your embedded SQL. So police your connections, delete unused ones, and don't add ones to the data model that you won't need. You'd add the connection to the data model to create a Power Pivot or a table in Power BI. Once it's in Power BI, you can do DAX, use relationships, and build and publish Power BI dashboards. You can't export it back to Excel, though. Third, take note that when you only create a connection like this, the connection won't show as a connections in this workbook when you go to use it to drive a pivot. It'll show up as connection files on this computer, or you can browse for it then. We'll see that in a moment. Now to drive a pivot or create a table from the connection to SQL Server that contains the embedded SQL. In Excel, on ribbon Insert, Pivot Table, Create Pivot Table pane, select Use an External Data Source and click the button Choose Connection. That opens the existing Connections window. The connection will be in Connections in this workbook if it's already being used to drive another pivot. Otherwise, it will be in connection files on this computer, or you can browse for more if you need to. select the connection you want to drive this pivot and click Open. That returns to the Create Pivot Table pane, which now shows the name of the chosen connection. Now it's the usual pivot setup, new or existing worksheet, and you get another chance to add this data to the data model. Set those and click OK. The Pivot Wizard opens. Now build the pivot as usual. The pivot table fields and the data contained are the result of the SQL embedded in the connection selected to drive the pivot. The OPI SQL Server sequence continues in OPI SQL Server Part 3, Stored Procedures and Open Row Set. Please subscribe to this channel and like the videos.